friends. Welcome back to The Secret Place. We're talking about faith, communication, and culture. And I am Stephanie, your host, and I am so glad that you've come back. Maybe this is your first time. If it is, know that what we do is I share a little book with you, a title and an author, give you just a little snippet to whet your appetite, whet your taste for it. And we'll talk about that for a few minutes, about 5 or 6 minutes after that. This is a book called Caring for Words in a Culture of Lies. Have you heard of this? It's by Marilyn McEntyre. And it's really a precious, precious book. I have a former student named Dan. If you're listening, Dan, hi. Who, when he first read this book years ago, he wrote me an email and he just detailed, you must read this book, Dr. B. This book is you through and through, through and through. And when I finally got it, I started reading it, and it was probably a year later after I did. I thought, he is so right. The problem with this book this week is there's 100 maybe places where I'd like to start to read to you and share it with you, but of course it's just a short snippet. So I have one in the very beginning of the book on page 2. It's about words, and Marilyn says, a large, almost a sacramental, let me start here. Words are entrusted to us as equipment for our life together to help us survive, guide, and nourish one another. We need to take the metaphor of nourishment seriously in choosing what we feed on in our hearts and in seeking to make our conversation with each other life-giving. I love that phrase, life-giving. About 20 years ago, I started hearing people say, that's not life-giving to me, or this is not life-giving. And it kind of caught on in our culture. You probably hear that a lot. But isn't it a great way to say what words do, or what different activities might do for us, or different relationships? Do they bring us life, or do they not? Or do they do worse? Do they bring us death and darkness? Words have the power to do that. Just think about the first time, or maybe the last time, someone said something, or you heard something that was said about you that really stung. They really can hurt, and they stay with us a long time. And I wonder why the encouraging words and the good words that we hear about ourselves don't stay with us as long. Did you ever wonder that? My goodness, we humans. Well, what Marilyn McEntyre is saying here, and the metaphor she's using about feeding on good words, words that nourish our soul, words that nourish others, is so really important. Many of us, and this last line, she says, we're seeking to make these words that we feed on in our hearts, seek to make our conversation with each other life-giving. Conversations should be, and in many cases, for many people, just wonderful opportunities to get to know another person, not just to share information, but really to enter into a place with that person where we get to know them, we get to know a bit about who they are, a bit about what makes them tick, they get to know a bit about us. For some reason, and we've talked about this before too, conversations can be hard, and for some people more than others. There's that whole group of folks that call themselves socially awkward. I don't call them socially awkward. They call themselves a little shy and socially awkward, never knowing what to say, shying away from conversation. There's all kinds of reasons for that. It's not just introvert, extrovert, but conversation has to be being conversational is something that we can learn. Many people learn it, very strong, good conversationalists often learn it because they grew up in a household where there's conversation, where the conversation and the curiosity about each other, not just what did you do today, but how did you feel about that? How was your day? Did you find anything interesting? If you grow up around a table like that, consider yourself blessed. Not everybody does. Some people grow up at a table where they're flinging mashed potatoes across the table at their brother's face. Is my brother listening? But we can learn to be conversational, and to be conversational, I think there are certain rules. I don't have this laid out in a theory or anything, but I do think there's some rules, unspoken rules of conversation. If you want to be a good conversationalist, don't purposely be offensive. Don't try to offend someone. Try not to be offensive. Try to really, number 2, listen to what the other is saying and build on that. It's called nexting. Go to the next subject, and they tell you something, ask them a little bit more about that. That's even more important than just going back and forth in reciprocity sometimes, where someone shares something about their life and then you say, oh, I've had that happen too. That's wonderful. That's part of conversation too. But I think early on, we really need to be curious about each other and about what the other is saying and be very strong listeners. Again, back to Marilyn McEntyre. I like the way she says words are entrusted to us as equipment for our life. Another, a scholar, Kenneth Burke, some of you may have heard of, called Literature, Equipment for Living. They're tools. They're tools to help us make meaning. And we need these tools. And just think about if you're a carpenter or if you're a knitter or a quilter, you need the right tools to do your craft, to build your table, to sew or quilt that blanket or that dress. If you have tools that are dull or aren't really the right fit, you either can't do what you want to do or you muddle through it, right? You muddle through it and the blanket kind of turns up like, you can tell the inconsistencies and not very satisfying. Words are tools. Words are equipment for our life. And so I think that's why, that's why I'm a word person. I love words. And my mother, of course, built that into me from a young age. She used to bring me home build your vocabulary books when I was 8 and 10 and 12 years old. And I just thought that was normal. Everybody did that. But all that to say is I want to leave you today with this, just a strong encouragement to get this book. I have it on audio as well, Caring for Words in a Culture of Lies. The ruination of a culture, the ruination of a relationship, the ruination of a family often starts with despicable, death-leaning words that drag a person down, words that are not true, words that are pelted at each other instead of shared with one another. And we see that happening in our culture today. We see a lot of dressing down in very vulgar terms of just the average Joe on the street, on the highway, in the cars, online, in politics. We've never lived in a pristine society where everyone is just so polite. Though, watching Poldark on PBS has really given me a sense of the 1700s and 1800s being so much more genteel. Clearly they were. But I'm not talking here about being nice or, covering up what we're thinking or feeling or what should be said by niceties and bows and curtsies. I'm not talking about that at all. I'm talking about making sure that if we want to be a good conversationalist, if we want to get to know people better, if we want ultimately to have strong communities and live in a culture where we can get along well with our neighbor and walk in peace, if we want that, let's let words be part of the equipment for life. God's given us the ability to create language, and what a blessing that is. What a blessing that is. It's a blessing to have you with me today. I hope that you have a wonderful week, and I hope you'll leave me a comment or a question. I'd love to get into dialogue with you, even if it's online. I'll go with that if that's all I can get. Take care, friends. God bless you. This is Stephanie signing off from The Secret Place.